Welcome to part 3 of the video showing how a cedar waxwing is made. This part deals with the painting of the bird. As many carvers will tell you, the painting is the most difficult stage of the completion of a bird carving. The bird is now undercoated, and I decided to do the legs and the base to get everything ready to show you how that, just tell you how that is done. The base is a piece of myrtle, and I chose that. I turned my bases way ahead of time, and I used different woods, and I chose myrtle for this one because the cedar waxwing, this is the photo that I'm going to be using. The color of the wood matches the color of the bird, and I try to do that if I can. You can't do it with a cardinal because there's no red wood, but what I do then is contrast it with, say, black walnut. Okay, then I set this perch up, and these are regular metal feet that you can get from a supplier, and this bird is all ready to paint. Now I want to show you what I used for the undercoat cut. This is the spray that I use for the sealer. It's a Krylon triple thick crystal clear glaze. Don't put 2 coats on. Your 1 coat will sink in. If you put a second coat on, it'll get too glossy and your paint won't stick to it. The next step is to coat it with gesso. And I normally use the raw umber to coat the, to tint the gesso a bit, because that makes it a little bit closer to the color of the bird and you don't have the white showing through. Cut. Now this is the way I'm going to start working on the bird. What I want to try to do is to come up with the base color. Out of all this area here, this is the base, what I would consider the base. This color is actually under the black here on the tail. It's up here in the wing, and it's up here in the tertial feathers. So what I'm going to do is coat this all the way up through here with the wings and up to this point back in here. So that's our first step. Now for that, I'll use titanium white, burnt umber, and Mars black. These are the 3 tubes that I use for most of my browns and grays. I found that I'm able to get different colors and adjust the color with them in different browns and grays. So now I'll start mixing here. Now you see that that gray coming up. Now I can warm that gray by adding a touch of the burnt umber. And if I want to cool it, I will add more black to it. Now, I'm seeing here I don't have quite enough blue in there, so I'm going to use some cobalt blue here to increase the blue shade in that. Now I'm getting what I want. A little bit more blue. Now your acrylics dry a bit darker than the actual paint that goes on wet. So you have to be careful that you don't overdo the color. Now I'm going to clean that brush off. and start here. This will dry a touch darker. Okay, that color is just about where I want it to be. And I'll show you a trick that I learned when I took a course in watercolors. It's almost there. Now, to blend this gray into the rest of the bird, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to wet this area with just plain water. And I'm going to bring that color up into the wet. And that will blend it. Cedar waxwing, if you don't know what you're doing, is one of the most difficult birds to paint because of all the blending that has to be done. Now see how that gray is blending up into the brown of the, or the tan of the upper part of the bird there. You just tweak it until you get the effect that you want. So I'm there now. Okay, now I'll go back and make sure that I have everything else coated here. I coat the bottom of the tail. Touch more water. You have to make sure that you get the paint inside all the burn marks, because it tends to go over the top sometimes, and then you see a dark line, and you want to get away from that. Okay, that is as far as I'm going to go with the gray. Now the next step is to dry it with a hair dryer. Now you can cut. The next step I'm going to do is to create this black in through here and up in through the wings and up in through the side feathers up in through here. Now I'm going to mix black with some of the gray that I just made, and I found that if you use color that you've already put on the bird to mix with, it blends a lot easier and it looks a lot better. Now the thing is, I can't use full black, so I have to tone it down a little bit with this gray. And I have to just keep adding a little bit more of the dark black until I get the color that I'm looking for. Now here again, it'll be drying a bit darker, so I don't want to make it as black as the picture. Okay, now I'm ready to work with that. Now I'm going to wet this area up in here because I don't want to paint this black. I just want the tip of the tail to be black. Now I'm going to blend that up into the water. need that a little wetter. Now the outside of each feather goes up a little higher with the black than the inside. So that's what I want to create here, like a step effect. Now I need to blend this a little bit more here. So I have to re-wet that. A lot of little tweaking has to be done to get it just right. Okay, now I've got the effect there that I'm looking for, and I will do the same to the tail on the bottom here. Okay, cut up is putting on the black on the back of the primary feathers here. Now, if you remember in the picture, the black is only on the upper edge of the feathers. Now I wet that, and what I'm going to do is to blend that like this. See how that blends? And I'll be doing the same on the other side. And one of the secrets you have to think of when you're mixing paint is to mix enough paint that you're going to have enough paint to do the whole bird. so that you don't have to mix new paint right in the middle and try to match, because that gets really difficult. See, now what I've done there is create a blended area from the upper part to the lower part. Now I'm going to dry that. Cut. Go. The next step is to mix this paint a little bit lighter, because as I get up into this area here, this is not as dark as the black as in there, so I'm going to lighten that up a bit. Now, first step is to wet the area. And then the darker goes right in through here. Now I'll touch this up here with the water brush. Back and forth a little bit. I'll do the same on the other side. Wet it, and then come in with my paint. Now clean that up. A little bit more paint here. Now we'll dry. Cut. Okay, the next step that I'm going to do on these, I'm going to wet these secondary feathers here and up into the back a little bit. And I'm going to take the same color but a lot less paint. Now the other side. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say, if you can't blend, you can't paint a cedar waxwing the way it's supposed to be colored. Okay, cut. The next step is to create this brown color in through here and blend it down into the gray that I just put on. So it'll take me excuse me, a minute or two here to do that. I'm going to be using raw umber. And raw sienna. Now the cedar waxwing on this picture is on the brown side. It's more of a warm brown. Sometimes you'll see them with a muted grayish brown, which is nice, but I like this color. And since this is a photograph of an actual bird, I'm going to be doing the paint this color here. So this is what I'm going to be starting here now. I'll take those two colors and start to mix until I get around the color that I'm looking for. The more burnt umber or raw umber that I put in here, the browner it'll get, and then the more raw sienna, the more warm it's going to get. Now, you got to be careful here. I'm going to put some white in this. You have to be careful because sometimes if you put white into something that you're mixing, it kind of gets it milky looking. So you got to be really careful not to get too much. But the white makes this color a little bit more opaque. If it's too transparent, it doesn't quite work as well. So I'm going to just keep adding a little bit of white until I think I've got what I need now. Okay. I want to warm that up a little bit. Keeping in mind that it's going to darken as it dries. I overpaint the areas. I'm going to be putting some black around the bill and the eye patch here, the mask, but I'm going to paint right over that right now because I don't want to take time and try to work around it. Now, here's the secret ingredient. In order to blend that, I want to wet this all down through here. Now I want to even out all the area here to make sure that it's all nice and even. See, there's a spot I missed right there. Go back and get it. Now it's a matter of tweaking everything to bring it all together. I want to bring some of the brown down into that gray. I'm drying up here. I need a little bit more water. Now the idea on the bottom here is to blend down into the body a bit, and then when I do the yellow, I'll blend the yellow up into this, and then I get a nice transition with no line, but just a blend right from yellow into the brown. Cut. What I'm going to do now is add a little bit darker colors in through here to blend this. See, there's too much of a difference between this and this. I'm going to darken some of this up here a little bit, but I'm going to be using the same color that I did for the brown, and I'm going to add some of my black to that. So that when I finish, it should blend all together. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is wet this. And then start right here. See, this gives me a better blending look. I'm even going to come down here a bit. Now see the difference between this and this. I don't have as much contrast anymore. It's blending together nicely. So now what I'm going to do is to dry this before I do the other side. And I dried that so that I don't handle that and smudge it. Cut. My next step here, I want to do a little bit of adjusting. I want to darken this area here. Now that I have the rest of it really well underway, I figured that this should be a little bit darker. Welcome to part 2 of the video showing how a cedar waxwing is made. This part deals with burning the texture with a wood burning tool. Now what I want to do is to do the underside of that tail feather, or the primary feather. Now I'm going to dry that. And do the underside of both of these on the outside. Now I wanted to get any paint that I smudged a little bit up on the upper side of that feather and take it off. Take the smudge off. Okay, cut. The next step that I want to do, it's going to be a little difficult to see, but the inside of each of these primary feathers here is darker than the outside. And that's what I'm going to be working on right now. Let me get my color. Now I'm using a finer, really well-pointed brush for that. Now I'll do the wet and then just do this, too wet. You have to have just the right amount of paint on the brush. Just a little tweak here and there. Now I'm going to dry that. You can cut, go. The next step here, if you notice the edges of the feathers are lighter here than the actual inside part of the feather. What I'm going to do now is to increase the lighter color on the outside edge of those feathers. And I'm going to do that with a sable brush. It's got to be sable. The synthetic brushes do not work for this. Now, the important thing is to get just the right amount of paint on the brush and just do the tips of each of the feathers. Now I'm also going to do some of the tail feathers here. Color variation is so important. And most of your feather edges are a little bit lighter than the inside of the feather. Now I smudged this. So I'm just going to take it off. So you can almost erase it with that brush. And then take a paper towel, take the wet off. Now, a little less paint. Now I got a little too much white on there, so what I'm going to do is darken the center here a little bit more. Okay, that's the effect that I'm looking for. Darken this just a touch here. Tweak here, tweak there, and all of a sudden it'll come together. Cut. The next step that I want to do is to put this yellow in through here. So I'm going to be using yellow oxide cadmium yellow medium. The yellow oxide is a little bit too dark. The cadmium yellow is a little bit too light. So I'm going to mix those two and then warm them up a bit with raw sienna. And I'll take that off the palette there. Now I'm going to need to add some titanium white to that. See, this is an in-between yellow. Now another thing I want to mention here. This part is bright yellow, and then it comes up, it blends to that darker color up and through here. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to coat the whole yellow with a little bit darker than that and come up through and then lighten this after I finish up. I know that goes against the painting rules, is to try to lighten something that's already dark, but it just kind of works with this bird. Now, first step here is to wet this area here so I can blend that yellow up into the brown. Now that isn't blended well enough there. I want to get a better blend, so I'm darkening it or adding more water to that. Now, I don't have to blend the bottom because there's more of a definition between the color of the yellow and the white that is down below. So I don't have to blend that. Now, I want to go over that and make sure all the burn marks are filled. See, there's some darker areas there that I can get more paint in. Okay. Cut. The next step I'm going to be doing is to put the white in this lower area here. Now, when I paint white, I don't usually paint white as it comes out of the tube. I'll always add a touch of raw umber to it because that gives it a bit of a warmer glow. And stark white really jumps out at you. And I want to try to stay away from that. Now this area here is not blended, but what you have is little tiny feather tips that come out over other feathers. And I'll show you how I deal with that here in a little bit. This brush is not quite small enough to handle that. I need a very fine brush for that. Now I'm going to take my fine brush with a real fine tip and I'm going to do some line work here. This is the way the feathers kind of stick up over the other feathers. You see just pieces of them, little tips. And then you got to go back over and make sure you get the paint in every one of the burn marks, or else they'll show up darker. Just little tiny strokes. Cut. After a bit of a break that we've taken, we're going to be starting on the mask of the bird right through here. Now, not only do you see the black, but also the white. And the white is blended out of the black. So I'll show you how we do that. That isn't actually just painted right on there. That has to be it has to come right out into the coloration. And also this bottom part here is a blend between the black and the brown. So I'll show you how we're going to do that whole mask there. And I'm going to do that with pure Mars Black. I'm going to start with the bill. then the mask coming down like this. Now that comes out into the fuzz on the front of the just over top of the bill there. And it comes down like this and then up. Now I'll be doing the same on the other side. And I have to keep checking to make sure that I get them even on and looking the same on both sides. I don't want one mask on one side to be a little bit higher than the other. I want to have that all the same looking. Now to do the bottom area here, I've got to go back to the blending, and I'm going to put water down in through here where I'm going to bring the black into it. And then I'll get a blended look into the lower feathers here under the bill. Just have to keep tweaking it until you get the effect that you're looking for. Okay, now I want to even that out. So what I'm going to be doing is this. You have to have just the right amount of water on that brush. And back and forth a few times until you get what you're looking for. Okay, cut. Now we're going to put the white on the face. Titanium white is what I use. Now, if you notice on the picture, the white is heavy here, but as it comes out here, it blends into the brown. So that's what we're going to do. And first thing is the upper area here. So I want to wet it. And you don't want it too wet because you don't want it to run really far. Now, I don't care about getting it on the black because I can change that and go over it. Important thing is to blend it up into the brown. Now I'm going to need a touch more water here. Now I'm going to work on the lower area here. This comes out, this is heavy white right in through here. But as it comes out, it'll have to be blended. So on goes the water. And then we'll blend that out. Back and forth. Now the other side. Heavy white here, and then blending as we come out. Just touch up around the edges. Now I'm going to dry the white. And then come back in and with the black and make a hard edge with the black. I want to rough up the edge a little bit with the black, make it look a little bit more natural. Now the next step is painting the bill. I need a little bit of burnt umber in here. The bill isn't pure black. There's a touch of brown in it, so that's what I'm doing now. I'm adding a touch of burnt umber to it. Now I'm going to paint both the upper and lower mandibles here. Now the lower mandible usually is a bit lighter than the upper. So I'm going to lighten that. Okay, cut. The next step, I'm going to scrape the paint off the eyes. That's something I don't worry about while I'm painting. I'll just work right over that. It makes it a lot easier not to have to work around it. Sometimes it takes a while because there's the undercoat on there and a couple of coats, a coat of gesso, and then a couple of coats of black. So that's going to take a while to scrape. This is a 5mm glass eye that I actually color the irises myself. I buy them clear and then coat the iris with the color that I'm going to be using for the bird. Eyes are becoming very expensive. When I first started carving, I could buy 100 eyes for $10. Now they're about $4 a piece. So they're very expensive. And you got to be careful when once you put the eye in, you don't want to do any more sanding on the bird because you don't want to take a chance of scratching that eye. So you have to have the bird totally carved once the eye is you're ready to put the eye in. Now we'll clean that off. Now there's a little white around the eye there. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to color the eyelid just a touch lighter than the black on the outside edge. And I'm going to paint that white. Here again, I'm painting up into the eye. That doesn't matter because I can clean that once it dries again. Okay, there we go. Cut. The next step, I'm going to lighten this breast area in through here. As you see on the page, that you can see little white lines in through there. Now, normally what you would do is start off lighter and then put darker lines on, but I do it opposite because I like to see this white looking out at me. And so I'm going to go with the titanium white, and I'm going to tint it with cadmium yellow, the same colors that I used to get the color of the breast. Yellow oxide, now I'm using a very fine brush here because I want a very fine line. Now I want to mix enough paint here to take me through the whole process that I'm going to be doing, so it's going to take me a few minutes. I got to get just the right color here because it has to be lighter than the color that is on the bird now, and you have to take into consideration that it's going to dry darker. I think one of the most important things in painting is to properly mix your paints and to come up with the right consistency, the right amount of water, not too much water, not too little. If you have too much water, it tends to just blow apart and everything just runs. But what I want to do is to work my brush now and get a nice fine point on there and start doing my lines. Now, don't forget, this is going to come in darker as it dries. And the secret here is to get a nice fine line. Color variation is the secret to this type of painting. You don't want to do just a flat coat of paint. You need to add more color to it, either when it's wet or when it's dry like this. If you get bored easily, this is not the kind of work for you. It takes a long time to get the effects that really makes this bird stand out and look natural. And see, I've already got a lot of this color on here already. A couple more minutes and it should be finished. Now that was a little bit too light. What I'm going to do is take my finger and just take some of that paint off of there. There are a couple of different ways to actually erase the paint once you put it on, if you get it before it dries. You can take a brush with just plain water and go over it, and then dilute it, and then dab it with a paper towel and clean it. And that's what I do sometimes. I just get a little bit too much paint. Now I'm going to bring it around and start coming up into the brown area. Now, doing this, I want to make sure that I have really fine paint on there and my brush is really got a nice fine point. Now what I'm doing is going over what I've already done. If I have an area that doesn't have quite enough paint on it, that's what I'm doing now, is adding a little bit of the lighter color to that to lighten it up. And the bottom area here is lighter than it is up on the upper part of the breast. So after I get all this color in, I'm going to lighten it a bit. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it. And this area here, I'm going to lighten. So now I add some more white to that. Get my brush nice and pointed, and then come back in here. Now I'm going to come down into the white just a touch to try to get a fuzzy look. And on the other side. A little bit more water. Now let's take a look at that. This is giving me just about what I'm looking for. So I'm going to say that is pretty much done. The yellow is complete. A couple little touch-ups here. Sometimes the burning marks get a little bit deeper and the paint doesn't quite get into them, so that's what I want to do here. A little bit lighter strokes here and there. Okay, cut. The next step, this is kind of a stark white here. What I'm going to do is to add a little bit more line work in here with white mixed with some raw umber. And raw umber is my go-to thing to just darken the white a little bit. It's a neutral brown. And some white into that. And it's a warm brown. So now here we go. Keeping in mind that this is going to darken as it dries. You almost can't see what I'm doing here now, but you will once it dries off. I use a lot of little fine brush strokes all over the birds that I do because it gives them a soft look. And then on the larger feathers, they're harsher looking, so that's where the sable brushes come in. And I'm going to be doing some work with a sable brush on here when I put the white on the wings on the back. And you'll see how that's going to be done. You can just barely see the darker color that's going on here now. You've got to be careful not to get too much of it in one place. You've got to get it all over. You got to keep that brush really, really pointed. Just the right amount of paint on there. Now, Some of these burn marks are a little darker. I'm going to get the paint in them and lighten them up a little bit. Okay, that's the effect that I'm looking for. Now that I have yellow on my palette here, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to put the yellow on the base of the tail. I want to get the right color there. These little things like this really help to set the bird off. Now, sometimes the yellow doesn't totally cover the dark black underneath it. So after I finish here, I might have to put a second coat on that. I'm going to dry that. And put that second coat on there right away. Now I'm going to dry that again and then do the bottom. I'm kind of afraid that if I don't dry that and do the bottom while the top is still wet, I'm going to stick my finger in there somewhere and smudge that. Okay, dry. And a second coat. This is one of the nice things about working with acrylics. You can dry them right away. At one time I was using oil paints, and I would use put a wash on a bird, and sometimes it would take 2 or 3 days for it to dry. And at that time, I'd have different birds sitting all over the house drying, and a list of things that I could do at a certain time after everything gets dried. So when I changed to acrylics, it was just an amazing thing that I could paint a bird all the way through and not have to worry about drying it. That hair dryer really works nicely for that. Okay, there's the bottom of the tail. That's finished. Cut. The next step I'm going to do, this is a little bit on the light side. If you look here on the picture, this is more dark as it is up and through here. So what I'm going to do now is get my this color up here, and I'm going to start to bring a little bit of that darker color into the back and get rid of some of that brown. Okay. Now this is the tried and true Mars Black, burnt umber, and white. And here again, if you put a little more burnt umber in there, you're going to get a warm brownish color. And that's about what I'm looking for right there. Now, I've got to get just the right amount of paint on that brush, so I got to take all the paint off of it. And get ready to go here. Now, I'm going to wet this whole area in here. Everywhere where I'm going to put paint, it needs to be wet. Take a little paint off the brush. See, now I'm going to bring that darker paint up and through here and darken this. It's worth the prep time to get just the right amount of paint mixed. It doesn't take long to actually do the painting. Sometimes it takes longer to mix the paint and get ready than it does to actually paint. See, now I'm getting the effect that I'm looking for. Got it. Cut. The next step that we're going to do here, you'll see the white edges on the feathers and the tertial feathers up and through here on either side, and also on the edge of the primary feathers down through here. Now I'm going to use a white tinted with raw umber, and I'm going to do that and mix that here. Get that raw umber. Now what I'm using here is a sable brush, and they give you an effect that you can't get from a synthetic bristle brush. I use mostly the synthetic bristles for just about everything except for this type of thing here. I want to add just a touch more umber there. Okay, I've got what I want. Now what I have to do is to get the paint off the brush. There's just too much on there right now. Wipe the brush on the paper towel to take excess paint off, because I want just a touch of paint on there. And I'm going to be run the brush on the paint just a touch, and now the edges start. Just touch the edge with the brush. You get a heavier white on the outside edge, and then less white as it comes into the feather, if you get the right amount of paint on the brush. It takes some practice. Now, that came into the feather a little bit too far there, so I can erase that by just dabbing it with water. Okay, a little bit heavier. Just a touch of water, some more paint. Take the extra off. And back again. Okay, there you have it. Now we'll work on the bottoms of the primaries here. And you only want about 2 of those primaries to have that white on it. Okay, cut. I forgot something here, and what I'd like to do now is to put a little bit of a white edge on these primary feathers here. And that's all I want to do, just a little touch. And that creates the white on the primaries right there. So now that bird is almost finished. Now, this is what I always call the finishing touch, and I'll show you that in a minute. Cut. The next step is the final step of the bird itself. I'm going to take some cadmium red, and I'm going to do these little tufts on the tips of the feathers here. What I need is a nice fine brush, my red, and I'm going to add just a touch of burnt umber to that red to darken it just a little bit. Now I want to use the real thick paint for this. Here we go. And there is your waxwing. Next thing we'll do, I'll show you how to, I'm going to be doing the feet, and then we'll put it on the base and he'll be finished. Cut. Now I put a coat of gesso on the feet. They're all ready to paint. So I'm going to do the color with one of my tried and trues here, the burnt umber, Mars black, and titanium white. Now the first coat that I'm going to put on is a little bit lighter than the actual legs because they're fairly black. Okay, this is my base color here that I'm going to be working with. Okay, they are ready to dry. Now you want them to be totally dry because the next thing we're going to be doing is I'm taking just plain black and adding a watery mix to it. I need quite a bit of water. Okay, and I'm going to be painting with that black. Now, because there's so much water in it, it's going to be allowing some of the color on the tops of the ridges, the underneath color to show through. Okay, now see how in here some of this area is starting to lighten. The higher areas are lighter, and then the lower areas have more paint in, they're darker. So I'm going to let these dry normally. I don't want to use a hair dryer on this because I want that effect to happen a little bit more. So we'll show you what happens in a few minutes here. Cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the darker areas of the feet there with a lighter color, but I've got to work on just the right amount of lightness to that because I don't want it to be too white, but I do want it to be warm, so I'm adding more burnt umber to that. Okay, now since I'm going to be doing a dry brush, I need to get some of the paint off the brush. And get just the right amount on it. And then I'm just going to use the tip of the brush and I'm going to go over the higher areas and darken or lighten them. See, what I'm doing now is getting the higher areas a little bit lighter than the darker. You gotta be careful that you don't put too much on. See, now you can see the color difference and the color variation in those feet now. Now the next step is to take a smaller brush and make the black toenails. Okay, there's 1 foot. And there's 2 feet. Now, one more little step here. Tom Ahern 2025. And there is our cedar waxwing all finished.